Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Better Business Bureau webinar in partnership with SWICKtech about how to identify and stop cyber attacks in your inbox. Thank you all so much for taking the time to join us today. The Better Business Bureau is a really proud partner with the National Cybersecurity Alliance, and October is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So as a part of that, we're bringing a lot of information and facts and statistics and important stuff for all of you guys to know, both as a business and a consumer. And this really is an important topic in regards to cybersecurity. And we're especially happy to partner with SWICKtech, our local BBB accredited business. They're truly an expert in cybersecurity and this aspect of IT. So with that, just a few housekeeping items before we officially get started. This is a GoToWebinar webcast, so there's a Q&A option in the bottom panel there for you. So feel free to put in your questions as we go. Our presenters today from SWICKtech, Eric and Shane, would be happy to answer any questions that you guys have today. So feel free to place those in the Q&A panel. And then this webinar is being recorded, so all of you who are attending live today, as well as anybody who registered, will receive the recording automatically tomorrow. So if you have any questions on that or logistics or anything, feel free to contact me or let us know in the Q&A panel as well. All right, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Shane and Eric today. First, Shane Koenig has been helping businesses across Wisconsin for the past 18 months as a client success associate at SWICKtech. Shane is a homegrown Wisconsinite, born and raised here in the greater Milwaukee area, and he currently lives with his wife, Allison, in Wauwatosa. Shane graduated from UW-La Crosse in 2012 with a bachelor's degree in information systems and later received his master's degree in engineering and management from the University of Colorado Boulder in 2017. Shane is a seasoned technology expert focused on the Microsoft stack and enjoys being able to improve productivity. And then our other presenter today is Eric Clark. Eric is focused on providing security and stability solutions to businesses across Wisconsin. Eric came to SWICKtech's sales and marketing team in 2017, where his role has morphed into a client success associate. Eric is the first point of contact for businesses when they begin a relationship with SWICKtech. Eric was born and raised also in southeastern Wisconsin and currently lives in Oconomowoc with his wife Holly and their 2 children. Eric also has a passion for hunting and spending time outdoors, and he founded a hunting phone app called Where to Hunt and hosts a weekly podcast of the same name. So with that, I want to welcome our presenters here, Shane and Eric. I'll give it to you guys.
Thanks, Julie. We're really excited to be here. And Eric, before we dive in, now that Julie said we're experts in technology, I'm going to call out that your presentation screen is inaccurate. I can see your notes page.
There we go.
So let's change that really quick here.
That looks much better.
Okay, is it correct?
Yeah.
Looks good now.
I haven't changed anything actually, so hopefully it's okay. Great. Well, thank you everybody for taking time out of your busy days to learn more about cybersecurity and what you can do to protect yourself. We'll go through a couple of things introductory here, and then we'll dive into some of the content we're looking to cover today. Thank you very much for the introduction. So I'm Eric, and obviously we just met Shane, so we don't have to spend a lot of time here, but we'll be your presenters today. And insofar as our agenda, we like to start with why are we doing this? We'll go into who SWICKtech is, and then we're going to talk about cybersecurity, the state of the union, so to speak, cover a few statistics, who are the bad actors, who are the people that are doing these things that we should be watching out for and why. And then we're going to talk about how to identify various threats that are coming through from your email and through online through websites and things like that, and then arm you with some action to take so you can protect yourself. And so the state of cybersecurity, so to speak, just some real brief stats. I don't want to read everything on the screen, but just a couple of things that jump out. If we look back at 2019, 86% of organizations experienced an attack. The big numbers at the top of the screen, if a breach occurs, 60% of those organizations lose their data. Now, SWICKtech has 0 bytes lost for all of the accounts that we've ever worked with and continue to work with. So that's something we're very proud of. Protecting your data is very critical. It's the top of the list for us. And if you look at this here, it's the top of the list of things that are not good. And then 50% of those organizations lose, have credentials or accounts that are compromised. It's just some things to be aware of as a business here in Wisconsin, that I guess you're not, everyone is in a position to be compromised, so to speak. So, and as we know, October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Their tagline, which we just actually did a podcast about earlier this week, Shane and I did, for SWICKtech, do your part, be cyber smart. To me, that sounds like a chant. It's very memorable, kind of cheesy, but why is that important? When an enterprise employees are cybersecurity aware, it means they understand what cyber threats are, the potential impact of a cyber attack, what that impact could be on their business, and the steps required to reduce that risk and prevent cybercrime infiltrating their online workspace. And that spectrum goes all the way to the consumers of the world, but also the businesses that we work with. And so real quick, before we dive in too deep here, a little bit about SWICKtech. We are located in New Berlin, so just outside of Milwaukee. There's about 30 of us that work at SWICKtech. This photo was taken pre-COVID. So some things have changed. We have some new people on our team, and we're mostly working remote still. We have a couple folks that are at the office kind of holding the fort down and running some things there. We've been in business for, this is our 16th year, and traditionally we're a managed service provider, so we can act as IT for a business or a complement or supplementary to an IT department and help with project deployments and architecture and things like that. But we're very security first in our approach. And so one of the things that we kind of want to navigate today is, human firewalls. There's a lot you can put in place for your business from an infrastructure standpoint to protect your perimeter all the way to the internet edge. Things like firewalls. There's a lot of hardware you can put in place there. There's also a lot of software you can put in place, like antivirus protection and filtering of websites and DNS and things like that. But at the end of the day, if all of those things are in place, some things still might get through. We're just trying to minimize that with our hardware and software approach. When it finally does get to someone as a human being, you can act as that firewall and identify, is this something I should be clicking on? What should I be looking out for, et cetera. These attacks are very sophisticated in nature, and they're designed to sometimes bypass all those other things I just mentioned, the hardware and software. Sometimes it never even touches that stuff if maybe one of your vendors was compromised. So it's really important as a human being to know what to look for. And so just an anecdote that I would like to share, when I sit in our outside sales seat, so to speak, I get to hear a lot of stories from our business community firsthand. And this picture of phishing looks really pretty and beautiful. Don't let it fool you. The phishing we're talking about is a type of social engineering attack often used to steer user data, including login credentials and credit card numbers. It occurs when an attacker is masquerading as a trusted entity, like I just mentioned, maybe a vendor, partner, and they dupe a victim into opening an email, an instant message, a text message, etc. And that attack can have devastating results. So the story I'll share with you, the results weren't devastating. They weren't great though. And what happened is a vendor was compromised, and someone had given up their credentials at a company in Milwaukee. And when the bad actor obtained that information to get into their systems, they sat dormant for 6 months, watching, learning, changing permissions, moving laterally within the IT environment, and just kind of plotting and planning their attack. And what they had observed by looking at calendars and email threads, etc., is that someone was taking PTO to get married. So when that person did get married and they had returned while they were out, the attacker had disabled certain replies from people. They had disabled other rules that would have alerted them that someone may have responded to them, etc. And essentially what had ended up taking place is that employee's payroll information was changed. An email went out to the CEO at the time asking them to update their direct deposit information because they're now married, right? And so they wanted to combine their checking accounts. So when that employee returned, he said, hey, where's my paycheck? I didn't get paid on, whatever it was, Friday. And they said, what are you talking about? You emailed me requesting that I change this information. And it was at that moment when they had realized they had a problem, right? Because neither one of them, one wasn't aware that they had communicated that at all, and the other thought that they had. And so they had to kind of untangle that mess and figure out what had happened. The money was gone. They eventually obviously resolved everything and got their payroll back up and everything. But once it gets to that point, it's not good. And that was a one-time occurrence, right? That took 6 months to play out for one paycheck to go to a bad actor. A lot of times you're going to find that there's a much bigger sums of money that are going out. But that was a really sophisticated attack for not a huge return for them. And so I like to challenge people to think about what we've traditionally thought a cyber criminal looks like. When I think about it, or before I started at SWICKtech, my thought was this is someone that is sitting in the basement with their hoodie up and doing hacker things. And, that's not really the case. They're after money. And in the success that they've had in like obtaining those funds, like an example like I just mentioned, they've been able to fund themselves really, really well. And so what we think an attacker looks like, really, it's more like this. It's a call center, right? Not located here in the US. There's a lot of people working like it's their actual 9-to-5 job to go in and infiltrate these things and masquerade the way that I just mentioned. And as a result, they have a help desk. They make it really easy for you to pay them. So if they get what they're after, they might request that you sign up for Bitcoin. And if you don't know how to do that, the help desk will walk you through that. And if you've had a good experience with that, meaning you were able to get that set up, you talked to a human being and they got paid, they'll actually ask you for a review and a rating. And so when you are navigating a ransomware attack and you've been compromised and they're holding your data hostage, requesting that you pay them, there are negotiators that exist in this space that will look for a company like this overseas that has a positive rating, because they'll be more likely to actually process that payment and give you your data back, because there is no guarantee that if you negotiate with them that they actually will do that. And there's some new things happening there too around not just holding the data hostage, but actually threatening to leak the data that you might have. So things that we're going to identify today, and I think I'm on a timer here, so I apologize, I jumped ahead. Our email security, and when we look at that, we're going to identify the sender. You need to know who it's coming from and know that it's coming from the person that you think it's coming from. There's ways to identify that. Look at the links. We've all been told, don't click on attachments and be careful of links, but there's some very specific acute things to look for that we're going to help you identify. And once you see these things, it's not meant to patronize you if you've already seen it, but it's kind of like this aha moment where you're like, oh my gosh, this was an attack. But then also attachments and what happens if things are opened up. Really, they're trying to create a sense of urgency and some sort of alarming thing like, open this now, you are late on this bill, or you're being audited. So there's some other things to look for too when you're considering this. So Shane, at this point, I think you'll take over. I'll drive the slides, and we'll let you kind of go through identifying a sender through email.
Great, thanks, Eric. Yeah, so like Eric was just saying, what are people doing this for? Why are they, sending these phishing campaigns and emails? Oftentimes it's going to be for some sort of monetary gain. So some common things to look out for and be suspicious of. If they're sending you some sort of sensitive information, or at least acting like they are, or asking you for sensitive information. If maybe there's a link in the email, that's another thing to look out for, and we'll get into the details here in a moment. Or if they're sending you an attachment. So it's important, and we'll talk about this multiple times as we go along here, but it's always really important to know the sender when you're receiving an attachment or a link if you're going to click on that item. So the first kind of category here is when you're looking at emails, you want to pay attention to the sender. Who is the email coming from? So there's a lot of different ways that they can spoof this and things like that. So always make sure that you know and understand the different aspects of an email address. So the first one here that we have highlighted in yellow is the domain, or that @swicktech.com address for us, right? So if you're expecting an email from me, it would be coming from @swicktech.com. In this example, swicktechcorp.com is not our email address or our domain, and so that's something to watch out for. Always make sure, if you're expecting an email from Microsoft or Google, make sure that it's actually coming from Microsoft.com or Google.com, not some unusual domain or an appended domain like that. The other part of the email address is the actual sender's name, right? So oftentimes bad actors will purchase a domain, like I had mentioned, a similar domain, but they will also use free domains like Gmail or Yahoo, and they'll try and trick you by just adding the name of the business as part of the username or email address in the front of it. So you can see here this example, ShaneSwicktech@gmail.com, still just a Gmail address, right? So be cognizant of the kind of two different aspects on either side of the @ symbol for those. And then once you've verified that the sender is the correct person that's sending you the email, a couple of things to look at in the actual links. So lots of times email can contain links that would take you to a malicious website or have an attachment that has some malware in it. So it's important to just know what that link is, where it's taking you. And there are tools out there that are available to scan and protect you from these types of links, but the first line of defense, like Eric said, is the human firewall, right? So we want to make sure that you know and understand that the link might not be taking you where you think it's going. And so just to go through kind of the details or aspects that you might see in a link. First up, we have kind of that similar aspect to the sender. We have the domain name. And so that's going to be the piece of the address in between the www and everything after .com or .gov or .org. And so that piece of it is critical, right? You want to make sure that it lines up with the website that you think you're going to. So good example of this is like tracking links for UPS or FedEx or things like that. Really, oftentimes those are going to be very complex links that will have a whole host of digits after the domain showing you tracking information and all that. So you really want to zoom in on that domain and make sure it's actually coming from ups.com. And so just to show you some examples here, right? Oftentimes you can hide a link or use a hyperlink to show you what, the attacker will show you what the link should be. So it might say, click here to track your package, but when you hover over it, that link might actually be taking you to a malicious site. So it's always important before you click on a link to hover over it first.
Yeah, legalstuff.info doesn't look like where I want to go, right? So they're cloaking it with wikipedia.org as a really, egregious example.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to walk through a few more examples of these. Normally if we were in person, we would go through these and have you guys guess. But in the interest of being online and in a webinar setting, we won't put you through sending in questions and answers. So we're going to walk through a bunch of these, but I'm just going to, read the first one here, and then we'll talk about if it seems accurate or not. So google.trustworthy.biz, in my opinion, not accurate or not a safe link, right? That's going to take you to trustworthy.biz, not a Google website. If it were Google, it would say google.com. Another one here, so drive.google.com/mydocument. You can go a little quicker.
Trying to trip you up, I want to see if you know.
Oh yeah, funny. And so that one is going to google.com, right? You can see that is drive.google.com. That's one of their tools. Google Drive, that will take you to an actual Google website. So next one here is Netflix, and it says netflix.com. So you can see that even though that looks like a really long string of characters, it's probably a link to a specific show or movie on Netflix, but it is an actual netflix.com domain. Next one, so this one might trip people up, but it says Microsoft.com, and then there's another .pc-hosting.ru. So the final domain there, if you include all the dots, you have to go until you get that first / is that pchosting.ru. So that's a completely different domain and would be considered malicious.
Yeah, .ru is actually a Russian domain. So, this is why when we looked at that anatomy of a domain, these are some of the things that you can look to identify things. So we'll go through the rest a little quicker. Sorry, Shane, I know I'm going
No, that's okay. So we'll just call out these last few, right? The next one is similar. It's going to silverfish.net instead of Bank of America. Wikipedia.org is an actual site, so that one would be a good link. And then the next one is taking you to hostbin.com, even though it looks maybe like Facebook Messenger. And that last one is kind of a tricky typo idea, right? They use Q's instead of G's for Google. Oftentimes I've seen a lot of links that will say Google, but it'll be spelled wrong. So be mindful of that. These common words, like oftentimes if you're not looking closely, you're not going to see a third O in the word Google. So the links are really important, right? You don't want to click on a link that's going to take you to a malicious website. And we'll get into some more details about what you can do if you do that, but it's really important to pay more attention to these. So on a similar note, we already talked a little bit about this concept, but same as a hyperlink, you can often embed a link into a button. And so keep in mind that even though that button looks good, it can still ultimately redirect you from the website that you think you're going to. So if you do click on something and it ends up starting to redirect you to a different website or something like that, just be sure you close out of that. And then the third piece in an email that you really want to look out for is attachments. So oftentimes we all send and receive attachments all day long, and you can kind of get some fatigue when you're thinking about this sort of stuff. But keep in mind that those documents and spreadsheets and PowerPoints, etc., can have malicious content embedded in them. Or they could be a malicious file and it just looks like it's a Word document before you click on it. So it's really important to know that you're receiving the email that you're supposed to be receiving. And so if you get an attachment from someone that you weren't expecting, it's always a good idea to check in with that person first before you open that document.
Could be a named person, but maybe you haven't heard from them in 6 months, and suddenly they're asking you for something like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Why would they be sending that to me? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, if you reply to them, some bad actor has already changed their inbox rules so that they're not even going to get that email from you. So in those cases, I've actually seen things like that come to me. I'll pick up the phone and I'll call that person if I do know them, and I'll say, hey, I think you may have been compromised. I got this email from you, and then they'll say, oh my gosh, you're the third person that's called me, and this is, what do I do? And then we can help. So in some cases, an email reply might not even get to them. And if you don't know them, then obviously, we've kind of already covered that. But in the case where you do, it's good to let them know that they've been compromised, because maybe they haven't figured it out yet. You may be that first caller to tell them, so they can then put a message out to everybody saying, hey, don't click what just came from me. That's not me. People might trust it.
Cool. So I think we're going to get into a few different examples. We'll talk through some senders and some link examples first to show you how these can be malicious, and then we'll go into some attachment examples as well. So Eric, this one's highlighted, but you want to kind of walk through and call out what you see here?
Yeah, there's some certain things to watch out for here. Obviously invoices shouldn't come through as a Word doc. That's a pretty big red flag right there. I'll just change the dollar amount to whatever I think, right? And I'll do that. So that's an invoice should never come through as a Word document. These are commonsensical things that you ought to be considering as you're looking at this. But if you notice, Barrett Gallagher doesn't match at the bottom. So it does say Barrett Gallagher, my bad. Airtel broadband.in is not community health systems. They don't actually line up. So that's two concerns. I don't see any real major sense of urgency with this one as I read it, but it's not very personal, which is fine. The next one though, this one has some things that if you look at the domain, which Shane just covered, like a .co, that's actually pretty hard to pick out. That would be a tough one to actually notice. We've redacted a lot of this. This is a real example. I think that we had captured from our help desk. But if you notice the grammar in here, doesn't really add up, you know, lowercase I, 2 weeks together, no capital U, another lowercase I. So like if you look at this, the sender domain, like where it's coming from, isn't legitimate, and then they're using some poor grammar and spelling in here. So it should just kind of raise that flag a little and go, this doesn't seem right. Some of these though can be a lot better. Like this at the time in 2016, this was very close to what an email from Microsoft would look like. So some of these can get really close. But again, if we're taking the lessons we're learning from this webinar and we're taking the time to look at where it's coming from, Microsoft isn't going to send anything out ever from a Hotmail email account. That's not how it's going to work. But if you didn't stop to look at that, you might actually click on that button. Then, you know, we're not sure where that button goes. If we hover over it, what would it say? Would it take us to a legit site? A lot of times they're cloaking the websites to masquerade, at the time, to what Microsoft looked like. So you get here and it looks like, oh, I should enter my username and password, right? Because it's telling me I need to update this information. But if we look at the domain name, that's not accurate. You know, it looks like a bunch of gobbledygook and it's not accurate. In fact, the word Google is in there, but this is a Microsoft site. So this should be a red flag for you. If it's not, what could happen here is you would enter your email address, you would enter your password, and in a world where you don't have multi-factor authentication, which you should have, you know, nothing will actually occur here. Nothing will change. You won't log in anything, but what will have happened on the back end is that bad actor has now acquired your email and password. And so they're going to go turn that out and try to log in and get in. This is where something like, we have not talked about multi-factor authentication yet, but that is where if they try to do that, you're going to get that text alert to say, have you tried to log in? The sketchy part about this is you might think, yes, I did just try to log in, please approve. So again, you could have a lot of technology in place, a lot of software, a lot of tooling to prevent these things, but you are the firewall. So these are some of the things that you ought to be looking for and paying attention to very cautiously. Shane, do you know more about this one here?
Yeah, so this is just kind of an example, another good example of how these folks can manipulate and make their website look very similar to a trusted site, right? So maybe they're trying to get you to sign into your OneDrive, similar to that Outlook email, and they sent you an email and said, you know, go here to update your credentials or change your password, and you pull up the website, and they've got a screen capture or a small clip of a OneDrive page. So, right, this, you know, at first glance, it's like, oh yeah, I'm on the OneDrive site, click and type in my password. But if you kind of zoom out a little bit, you can see this is hosted on a completely different website. And then just one more similar example, right? This is an even better one than the last one. Here is a, you know, a fake login page for OneDrive, but you can see that the web address up on the top is a .xyz domain instead of .com. And so all of these links would not take you to Microsoft OneDrive logins.
But this is the level of detail they're trying to go to. So the only thing left unturned here is that domain. This is really close, if not identical, to what you would get to if you were trying to log into this. So if you're going through your busy day and you're on a call and there's a lot happening, like you might just try to log in here and now you've been compromised. It happens that fast. Some attachment examples. This one is trying to kind of display some urgency. So if we go through this way that we've been talking about, diddle at cardconsultants.com. Okay, is this someone we know? Is it not someone we know? Let's put that through our process here. Diane, you can see her name too. Okay, great. Here's a problem. Is a subpoena going to come through a Word doc? Again, no. They're trying to do that rather than a PDF because there's macros inside of Word, so it can actually run some software and some code and some executables that can deploy some malicious code on your computer and communicate back to the mothership. So again, there's some sense of urgency here saying like, it's saying I got sued by you, so this is concerning, oh my gosh. But everything else is checking out short of that subpoena, right? Coming through as a Word doc.
Yeah, and another important thing to point out on these, Eric, is a couple of these examples, maybe a little older, but you can see actually this one's from March, and they sent over a .doc or doc file, which is actually the older version of Word documents. So oftentimes most people in business environments are going to have an up-to-date version of Word, which is going to save as a .docx file. instead of just .doc. So keep that in mind too, right? These older versions could have some security vulnerabilities and stuff. So that's another little thing you can catch. But we can also see in this example, there's a couple of areas that are concerning, right? They have a Word document. Again, who sends important information in a Word document? Usually you're going to want that in a PDF. And it's coming from yahoo.com. And additionally, it's warning you it's from outside your organization, right? So if maybe this message was posed as if it was a coworker or something like that, now you know for sure that it's coming from someone else's account.
And if your organization has one of those flags at the top, that's something that's set up by your IT administrators. Like, that's not an easy thing. Like, that should look the same every time when it's coming through the correct way. So if something looks like that, that's kind of weird. You would have got an update from your IT department likely saying we've changed our header and it looks like this now. But again, that's them just trying to take it another layer deeper to try to spoof you. This is an example of if you were to actually open one of those things. So nothing's going to happen yet unless you click enable editing. But what you'll notice here with that blue kind of bar at the top of the Word doc, that's actually content within the Word doc. It's already editable. You can see the cursor is flashing there. It's not actually flashing, but you can see where it would be. So like, that's not actually a warning label. They're trying to get you to click enable editing so they can bypass your security protocols from Microsoft and have this thing deploy its executable. So don't click that enable editing unless you're 110% certain this is something you ought to be doing.
Cool. So enough of the examples. Something else that we did want to touch on, there are phishing simulation tools available to help educate and inform your colleagues or employees of these types of attacks. And so we want to call that out here. This is an example of, I believe, Microsoft Office 365's version of this, but there's all kinds of them out there. KnowBe4 is another really big phishing simulation tool and training tool. These are great tools to help educate and provide teaching moments for your staff and your team to learn what is a safe email and what is a malicious email. And so these tools, you can see, you can kind of brand and craft and create a fake phishing attack. You can put your logo or a Microsoft or Google logo or whatever in this email and send out a fake email and see how many people click on the links or open the attachments. And so we do caution, we don't recommend that this be used as some sort of disciplinary tool or a gotcha to try and catch people accidentally opening phishing emails, but it can be very valuable to teach your team how to pay more attention to these attacks and be more aware and cognizant of them. And then, a big question that always comes up is how do you what do you do if you identify a fraudulent email? So Eric kind of touched on it a little bit before, right? If you know the person, maybe it's a good idea to hop on the phone and be like, hey, I think your account's compromised if you're getting that kind of email. Or if you just get a generic phishing email, oftentimes it's smart to forward it on to your manager or your IT department or partner, and let other people in the company know. Maybe send a quick chat or Teams message or something like that to other folks to let them know, hey, I got this from a vendor and it looks like their account's compromised. Make sure you're watching out for that email. And then the most important part, delete and completely ignore the email, right? Don't click on the links, don't do anything with the attachments, etc.
Deleting it's important so you don't accidentally bait someone else into doing it. Like, don't forward it on to say, hey, is this a thing? Because someone else might click it, right? And don't keep it around so you don't accidentally do something with it.
Cool. So moving on from email security, we're going to talk just very briefly on some web security aspects, and this will tie very similarly to the URLs and the domains and stuff. But a fun question we always like to ask folks when we're in person for these events is, what browser do you use? And there are a lot of different opinions and inputs out there, and most of the browsers listed on this page are great options. If you are using that blue Internet Explorer icon with the halo over it, that should be deprecated. So you might want to talk to someone in your IT department about that. But all these other ones, Safari, Firefox, Chrome, and Microsoft Edge on the far right there, are acceptable browsers today. And really the important thing is, regardless of which browser you use, make sure it's up to date. So oftentimes these browsers will have a little flag in the upper right settings corner when it has some updates to run if you leave it open for too long. So always be sure you're closing on your browser so it can get the latest updates, and or restarting your computer if you have updates for the computer as well. So a couple of aspects of good web security. Always be paying attention to the web address and the URLs that you're going to. Right, we touched on this on the link side, but it's also important if you're browsing the web and you click on a link or something on a website, even if you trusted the website you were on, if it's redirecting you to a different site, it can be malicious. So keep that in mind. And on top of that, keep in mind that there is the ability to kind of fake what a browser looks like. So you can see here we have the real browser tab across the top, and then second to that, these folks have implemented kind of a screenshot or an image with a fake browser to make you think you're at Microsoft.com. So if you've accidentally like toggled your browser into full screen mode, you might not even notice that. So it's just important to be cognizant that that's possible. People are faking those addresses, and you should be aware of that sort of trick. And then second, and probably more important than that, is make sure that you are on secure connections. So the browser's URL will always start with HTTP, and there should be an S on there to show that you're on an encrypted or a secure connection where the person who's serving up that website has gone through the effort to purchase and attach an SSL certificate or a secure socket layers certificate to make sure that their website traffic is encrypted. This isn't a guarantee that that website is safe, so keep that in mind that these are kind of two separate aspects. But if you're going to be purchasing something from a website, even if you know that the vendor is the appropriate vendor, if they don't have HTTPS, then that's a red flag because your credit card information or however you're paying is going to be transported across the internet in plain text. So those are just a few quick items in web security. And then I think we want to shift gears here and talk a little bit about account security and some best practices, things that you can be doing, and some tricks and tips to use to make sure that your accounts and your passwords and stuff are safe. So
a lot of us are guilty of the first one here. So it's a hard one to kind of get yourself out of that.
Yeah, that's a big one, right? And most people, you ask them, they'll tell you they reuse passwords across multiple websites. I think your PowerPoint switched screens there.
Oh, yeah, I didn't do that.
Oh, there it goes. Okay, cool. Sorry. All right. So don't reuse passwords, right? Oftentimes people will use the same password for a lot of accounts. That's a big no-no because if you use a password for work and your Gmail account gets compromised and it's the same password, now you have to go in and quickly change your work password. If you don't change it quick enough and it gets compromised, that's going to be a tough conversation to have. So make sure you're never reusing the same passwords, and really your passwords should be unique, and we'll touch on that more too. Second best practice is use a password manager. So if you've got all different kinds of passwords that you use, they should be stored in a password manager so that you don't have to remember them. There's a lot of them out there for personal use. 1Password, LastPass, KeyPass are all ones that come to mind, Bitwarden. And then there's also business or enterprise versions of a lot of those, or other ones that you can use in enterprise settings so that you can securely share passwords for a team of people. That's a really valuable tool, maybe in accounting or on your marketing team, to share the passwords for your bank accounts securely or for your social media accounts. So definitely use a password.
The business owns that stuff too, right? So it's not left to some employee single-threaded that has made up whatever password they want that they're maybe not even fully aware of. So it's all like a repository that anyone can get access to on that team, or like not anyone, but you can control the access as to who gets what access to which folders and which passwords, etc.
Yep. And then also make sure that you're avoiding using simple words or common phrases for your password. It shouldn't be so basic that someone could guess it, like your dog's name or something like that. And then always turn on multi-factor authentication. We'll touch on that a little bit more later, but if you have it available, you should definitely try and turn it on for your accounts. And then I already kind of mentioned this, but use a strong and unique password. That's always going to be better than a weak password. Even if you change the weak password more often, they're much more easy to be cracked. Cool. So I kind of touched on benefits of a password manager, but some things that they allow you to do, you can use unique passwords for all your accounts, right? So we already said that's important. So if you have a password manager, it can randomly generate passwords for you. You don't have to remember them. It can be a string of random characters and numbers and letters. That data or information, if you're using a good password manager, is going to be encrypted and protected by a really strong master password, so other people won't be able to get into your data. And oftentimes they'll work across multiple devices or platforms, so you can access your passwords on your phone, on your Mac, on your PC, etc. And they all offer the ability to store some additional notes and details. So you can store, maybe the security questions and answers in there as well, and things like that are also secure and encrypted. You want to touch on MFA, Eric? I know you love talking about it.
So if you're not familiar with multi-factor authentication, or also called MFA, most people have probably been exposed to it from their bank, hopefully a couple years ago at this point. But it's something that so you know your password. It's something that you have, which is potentially your phone. Most people now, anyways, in the past, before smartphones became so adopted everywhere, let me go back, it's on that timer. That could have been like a fob or something like that. And then it's a biometric factor. So most smartphones today are going to scan your face or your fingerprint. So those are three components that a bad actor isn't going to have if they go to log in. And you have MFA enabled, your phone is going to, buzz or whatever it's going to do. It's going to send you a notification saying, someone's trying to log in. Is this you? And then verify that it is you. And that verification is going to consider these three factors. There's also 2FA, which is two-factor authentication. I believe that's more where you can kind of get on the on-ramp there, where that's like a text message, right? It's going to send you a code. This is a little bit more than that. And then there's, I forget, dynamic factor authentication. That's got a little bit more going on to it than this even. There's some things that you can put in the background to verify, like geofences and things like that. Like if you're not in this particular office, then it's not going to let you in. We recommend that, that everybody in your organization should have this enabled. But if you aren't in a position to like make that change happen for everybody, at the very, very minimum, protect the people that are in control of finances and people that are in control of decisions. So those are the two most important things to protect out of the gate. Everyone should have it. Start there, and if you can't, then start where I just said. And additionally, even in your personal lives, like go put MFA on LinkedIn, go put it on Facebook, go put it on Instagram. Have your children do the same. Like this is not very difficult to turn on. And then there's authentication applications. Microsoft has an authenticator. Google has one. I forget what theirs is called. Shane, you probably know because you don't have an iPhone.
Google Authenticator.
Oh, perfect. How easy. And so these things will have a code that's on rotation in some cases where, it'll expire every 30 seconds or what have you. So when you get to that screen, you're going to type this in. So, look, sometimes it's a little bit of friction. It's an extra step, but that extra step is like a pretty big deal when you consider the things that you're trying to protect and that could be compromised. So, there's tools that are making that better, like what I just had mentioned about like geofencing and things like that, where it'll take some of that friction out of that for you. But it's really worth it, honestly, in this day and age. It's a really good, it's not a silver bullet, but it's going to account for a lot of attacks that could harm you. Some things that we're, offering from this webinar, we can do a dark web scan. Essentially, if you've been compromised, we can put your information, your email address, and see if there's been compromises on the dark web, meaning is it been put out on that platform, the dark web, and if so, where did that compromise come from? And we can identify like, look, oh, your Adobe account was compromised or your whatever was compromised. The response side is go and update your username and password there, or your password, I should say. Is that accurate, Shane? I don't want to be talking out of turn here,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
Thank you. So that's something that we can do for you guys. And there's some other things too that we can offer, and you'll see an email come from us. So if there's any interest in these things, like please let us know. But what can you do, Shane? I think this is an area that I'd like you to speak to, especially in regard to like safe links and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of different areas. We've touched on some of these, but we'll go over them real quick again. And like Eric said, we'll be sharing an email with details on all of these. So first one up is spam filtering. So there's all kinds of spam filtering tools out there, but in today's world, it is kind of a bare minimum recommendation that you have spam filtering turned on. This is not the end all be all. This is going to stop some of the spam, but if you crank the spam filtering features and tools up too high, now you might start losing legitimate business emails. And so we don't want to do that. So it is kind of a balancing act there. But that goes hand in hand with safe links, and safe links and safe attachments are actually a Microsoft tool, but there are other spam filtering suites out there that have something similar. Essentially what that's going to do is it's an advanced feature in your spam filtering that's going to scan links and attachments. And if it deems them as not safe, they're a malicious link, it won't let you go to that website or open that attachment. It's going to
disable that link altogether, right? So then even if you go to click it, it's not going to actually happen.
Yep, you'll get pop up to a company branded page that says we scanned this link and it's malicious, so you can't go there. And then the ones right below that, training and phishing campaigns, kind of go hand in hand. So training is teaching your team or your staff how to do these things and watch out for these email tricks and stuff that we went over today. And then the phishing campaigns are a great learning tool to kind of tie into the training. So maybe you have a training and then you send out a phishing campaign and you see that 50% of your staff still clicked on the link or opened the attachment. And so maybe we need some more training on that, and we can kind of go back and forth with that to try and help your team learn a little bit more about this stuff. And then that last one, dark web scanning, Eric already touched on that, but we have a way to scan your domain and see if there's any hits for accounts on the dark web. And so what that really kind of looks like is maybe your account, one of your accounts, your LinkedIn page or your personal email or your work email was hacked at one point. You know that organization had an attack, and so it will alert us of that sort of stuff. And oftentimes it'll even show us what password or information is being shared. And you can say, oh gosh, I still use that somewhere. I need to go change those passwords.
Cool. And to kind of bring it full circle, it is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so SWICKtech is hosting a cybersecurity think tank. It's a virtual roundtable event, October 21st at 2 p.m. We'll have our CEO will be on the roundtable. Someone from the Waukesha County District Attorney's Office will be present on that. Wisconsin Bank and Trust, in fact, someone from the Better Business Bureau will be there as well. Our friends over at IronNet Cybersecurity, and someone from Rodrian Insurance. So a really well-rounded group of people that all have different perspectives around cybersecurity. So we have a really strong panel. I'm really excited to do this. We did this a few years back with a really similar flavor of panelists. And we were able to answer a lot of questions that the audience had about different things from different perspectives. So especially like the district attorney's office, they get to see the cases that are actually being reported against, but not everything's being reported. And like the insurance companies work with the FBI in some cases. So like there's just a lot of knowledge that's going to be brought together for this. So we're hoping that if you want to learn more about how you can protect yourself and what the landscape really looks like for our region specifically, this would be a great event for anyone to come to. So thank you so much for tuning in today. We will send some follow-up information out to everyone that had attended. So please be on the lookout for that within the next day. And again, thank you for your time today.
So I think we're going to switch into some Q&A here, Eric, and answer a few questions.
Yeah, like we just got a question. Did you want me to read that for you guys, or do you?
Yeah, go ahead, Julie. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. I popped back in. So somebody asked, if I right-click the link address and copy the link to a text document to verify the URL link, can it be just as dangerous as opening the link in the email itself?
Wow, very cool question. I would say it's not as dangerous as opening a link, and it's, it is one way to try and see that text behind it. Usually you'll be able to just hover over it with your mouse and see it. But this is kind of a clever way around that if you, for some reason, you hover and you can't see it. I would say just be very cognizant now that you've copied that link, it's on your clipboard, and so if you accidentally paste it later when you think you're pasting something else, you might still end up going to that website.
Great, thank you. I think that's one of the only questions we have right now. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to put those in the panel. Apologize, I just saw my face. I've got blinds next to me so you can see a nice little design, a new fashion statement, I guess, today. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. I know we at the BBB actually used to use KnowBe4. I don't think we've used that recently, but it was kind of embarrassing, to be honest with you, because a lot of us fell for it. And here we are as the BBB trying to get out this information about how not to fall for scams and fraud and malware scams and things like that. And we did it ourselves. So it's the same as any type of scam information that we put out there. We encourage people to never think that you're too smart, that you won't fall for this, because that's when you will. Because even we who talk about this stuff all the time, you're going through your day very quickly. It's easy to just open something accidentally in your email.
Yeah, honestly, so we use KnowBe4 for some clients and stuff, and you would be amazed at the percentage of clicks and stuff, because it really is. I mean, it's designed to kind of get you thinking about this stuff, because if you're moving at 100 miles an hour, you're really not going to be paying attention to that sort of stuff. So.
Right, exactly. Oh, it looks like we have one more question. Somebody's asking how long the think tank event is going to be on October 21st. Is it about an hour or a little longer? You've got a lot of speakers there.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Do we have the answer? I think it's an hour to an hour and a half. We'll clarify that though, and there is an event page for it and everything like that too, so we can certainly update that, make sure we include that information there. Great question.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, our president and CEO Jim Temmer will be on that panel, so we're really excited that we get to participate in that as well. That's awesome that you guys are doing that. Okay, any other questions? I think that is it. All right. Well, with that, we'll wrap things up here. Thank you again so much, Eric and Shane. This was great information. It's really nice to see those specific examples, especially so we know what to look for and how hopefully not to fall for any type of malware scams or any sort of cybersecurity risks in our email inbox in the future. As I mentioned earlier, this webinar was recorded, so we will be sending it to you, all of the attendees who attended live, as well as those who registered and weren't able to attend. You'll receive that email sometime tomorrow. And if you have any questions, feel free to follow up with me, Eric, or Shane at SWICKtech. And if you'd like to, let us know if you have any suggestions for future webinars or future information that you'd like to get from the Better Business Bureau as well. So thank you, Eric. Thank you, Shane, for your time today. This was really helpful. And we appreciate you joining us all today. So thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye now.